All right, let's talk about this thing. It's making the rounds. It's the latest Sphere video that came out. What's unique about this one is it's pretty high quality, and they zoom in pretty close. So there's some really good information that we can tease out of this. So I'm going to let it play a little bit. I think this is a legitimate video. I think this was an actual object that was recorded. I think the Sphere is not CGI. It was recorded on a phone, and you can see how when a phone, right, the cameras in the phone, there's usually like 3 or 4 lenses, right? They got multiple lenses on it, so 3 lenses. When you're zooming in and out, it's going to switch between lenses. So optically, it's going to be, for the long zoom lens, you're going to get clarity, punching out pretty far. But then as you back out and you get into that mid-level zoom, that mid-level lens, then it's going to be in a digital zoom. So then it's going to be digital, and then it's going to pull back into the optical. And then when it switches to the next lens, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to be digital zoom back in the optical. So, and you can kind of see that here, right? Right now we're in the long lens. So it's in the zoom lens. You can see it's pretty clear. Right there, it switches over to that second lens. So it's a little bit, it's digitally looking. Quality's less, and then it switches over to the next lens right there, and you can see the white balance changes. That center lens has a different white balance than the other two for some reason. Also, let's talk about this. So these artifacts that are showing up around it, this is, I believe, the H.265 video algorithm encoding. It's just basically, that's the type of noise that gets generated when the algorithm doesn't know exactly how to compress an area. And it just gets a little messed up like that. And you see that in areas that are not just around the Sphere, in other areas in the video as well. So I don't think that's any artifact of this being CGI or anything like that. I think what this video is telling me, from what I'm looking at, the color space, the way all the colors are across the object itself, the background, the foreground, all of that, it all, to me, to my eye, looks like it matches. And when I did some color analysis on it, just real quick, it was also matching as well. So I truly believe that this object was floating in the air in front of this guy as he's recording it. Now the question is it floating into the air under its own power, or is it being lifted by, like a drone or helicopter or whatever, by a long line? Though it's one of those two questions, right? Now, of course, we want to believe that this thing is floating on its own. I do. I want these things to be a real deal because it's super unique and really interesting. But there's a few things that I'm going to point out here that draws that into question. Okay, so we can see there's 2 main things on the Sphere that we can use to identify its flight characteristics. One is the reflection, right? You can see this is the reflection of the ground. And then, like the Booga Sphere, this one has that seam going around the kind of like the equator of it. And when it seems to be, it wants to be level, right? That they want that to be level, and it pretty much is as the video starts, right? And the question is it getting pulled by a string? Well, if it's getting pulled by a string, right? There's a string on the top, and as like a drone would pull it, it's going to pull to the side. There's going to be a little bit delay. And you're going to see the Sphere rotate over as the top part of it gets pulled, right? So that would be an effect that we would see if the force of this thing moving around was coming from the very top of the Sphere. And we're not really seeing that, which makes you believe, okay, this thing must be flying under its own power. So right now it's flying really flat. It's not doing any of that orbital kind of like resonance, where it's kind of rotating on a central axis and just kind of doing this. It's staying flat. You can start to detect that there's some rotation in the object when we get to some detail coming up here, and we should be starting to see it as soon as the detail pops in right here. So here we're starting to wobble, okay, and you could see the rotation. So it's starting to rotate in this direction in the video, and now we're starting to see the wobble. And I think that wobble is a key factor here, because when I looked at this video, in my mind I was like, it can't be getting pulled by a a drone because it's staying way too flat. It's not reacting to, the tug of it getting pulled from side to side. It's staying relatively in the same spot. Here you can see it's starting to rotate over this way, right? There's the wobble and it's leaning over towards the direction of motion. But as it drops down, it stays in that direction, right? And it continues to wobble. So even as it's moving to the left, right? You can see it's going left and then it stops and goes down. It doesn't change its orientation and the wobble stays the same. Okay. So it's either flying under its own power and that's its flight characteristics, or we got something else going on. So from what I'm seeing here, it's not being pulled by a line, but I'm going to have a caveat with that and I want to show you, but let's get through the rest of the video here. So, all right, we're back to being relatively neutral, right? Flight level according to the horizon or the equator of it, and it's matching pretty much the reflection on the bottom, but we're still wobbling. Okay, and let's see, can we see rotation still? All right, not enough detail to see rotation. All right, I want to show you something. So if you were going to design an object like this and you want it to stay extremely locked in, right, and have no visible movement like this, right, as it's getting tugged around, you would have to do one of two things. You would have to actually cut a hole in the top and put the string down into the object, so that way you're pulling it from the center of mass. You're not pulling it from the very top, you're pulling it from maybe just above the center of mass, which is going to make it want to stay in that same, orientation the entire flight. Or, and this is what I don't like that I've seen this. So now we're going to go and we're going to talk about gyroscopes. So I think there is a very distinct and real possibility that this sphere has a gyroscope in it and it's being pulled from the very top, but there's a gyroscope inside and that's being used to stabilize it. So I couldn't find a video of a gyroscope hanging from a string. I don't own a gyroscope to be able to even play with it, but this is going to demonstrate the same physics, right? The same mechanics, gyroscopic mechanics of how they move. And that right there, you see that wobble? That's very similar to what we're seeing in the sphere itself. And that's gyroscopic action when it gets out of balance and it's kind of fighting to stay in that plane of rotation, right? You start to generate that wobble. Man. And you can see it here. You can see it moving like this, just like the gyroscope is wobbling here. So it's not complete proof that this thing has a gyroscope inside of it. But the problem now is there is an explanation for its flight characteristics and its behavior, right? The fact that it's starting to twist over and the fact that early on in its flight, it's very stable, right? There's a very little bit of wobble that you can kind of detect, but it's not much. But this is very stable early on. Very stable. And then as we move on the flight, the stability starts to drop off and it starts building that resonance in the wobble. It starts to get amplified, right? It starts to move more and more. So, and this is the part that I hate, right? So now it's like, it draws in the question. If it's possible that this has a gyroscope in it that is stabilizing it and being towed by a drone, what does that mean for all of the other sightings that we have now? Now, we can go back and look at all the other ones that have come out and see if we see the same characteristics in it. But maybe this is just the flight characteristics of these spheres. We just don't know. If these things are truly exotic in nature and they're alien technology or whatever they are, they're going to be moving around in a way that we just don't truly understand. but there's something that we have that's terrestrial that we know that we can use for stabilization. It's gyroscopes. And the fact that this is losing its stability the longer you go into the video, to me says that it could be a gyroscope inside that's manually operated. You know, you basically, the way they work is you put a string around it, you roll up a string, then you pull the string, it spins the gyroscope real fast, and then you take off with the sphere, and you do your flight, and you come back down. The flight's not long enough, right? So the video is, you know, it's just, how long is it? It's 1 minute and 30 seconds. So it's not that long. And it could just be running out of speed, and, you know, it's an accumulation of oscillation that's, that the gyroscope is fighting against. But that's what I'm seeing here. So for me now, seeing that, it's either the sphere that's flying around on its own, or now it's actually the sphere that has a gyroscope inside of it that's most likely manually spun up, and it's flown, and it's only flown for a short duration, because that's how long, you know, the gyroscope can actually hold the stability. So that's where I am with this. And we're just going to have to watch and see if more videos come out so we can look for more of those types of characteristics. We can go back now and look at the other flights and see if they have the same type of movement to them. But I'm kind of a little bit disappointed in seeing that in here and being able to liken it to what a gyroscope would do and how it actually stabilizes an object. So that's where I am with this. Let me know what you think. You know, I want it to be real, but we also have to be, you know, very cognizant that it could not be, and, you know, we got to look for things that it could be that's not, you know, off planet or NHI or whatever. So that's what I got on this one.